Hi everyone, this is audap. Let's continue our game of Raging Loop, running on PlayStation 5, although this is a PlayStation 4 game. Although it could easily run on like a PlayStation 2, but that's beside the point. And so we walked up the hill and arrived at this so-called Nasato Mansion. From what I could tell, it was located at the highest point in the settlement. And, like Jamie said, it was definitely a hell of a building. It had an elegant Western design, which would probably look even better if the place were better maintained. The yard was overgrown, and the building itself was pretty much buried in ivy and small trees. If someone told me it was cursed, I'd instantly believe them. Did people actually live here? She pressed the button next to the aged iron gate. Yasumizu was a quiet place, so I could easily hear the bell ring inside.
もう一度押そうか?
やめとこ。何度も鳴らすと心象悪いから。
そんなに気難しい人なの?
そうね。気難しい。うん。いい表現だ。
I wasn't sure what she meant, but I opted to just wait rather than ask more questions. Soon enough, the person in question walked out of the mansion.
なんだ? 誰だ?
He wasn't young, but he didn't look middle-aged either. He certainly looked high-strung, that much was sure.
どうも、野里さん。芹沢です。
知っている。芹沢千恵美。そっちの青年は存じ上げないがね。
春明さん、こちら野里清之助さん。清之助さん、事故車の夫妻師春明さんです。
That introduction was the briefest one yet.
は? なんだって?
I explained the situation again. He furrowed his brows when I mentioned the Saranaga in addition to the reason we were here.
というわけで、早々にここから出ていくためにも、修理道具をお持ちだったら貸していただけないかと。
タイヤはチューブですかね?
Huh?
一応パッチもあるがね。チューブタイヤだったら素人には難しいんじゃないのか? できるならいいがね。なあ、チューブがバーストしてたら交換するしかないが、替えはさすがに持っておらんよ。譲る義理もないがね。
すみません。ちょっとそのあたりあんまり詳しくないまま乗っちゃったんで。
ちょっと話にならんね。おとなしく何十万高の勉強料を払って拾ってもらうのをおすすめしよう。
Yeah, I had no retort to that.
野里さん、多分ですけど、今の時期これ以上よその車がここに入るとか良くないんじゃないです？
は？君は間違いりだろう。未だにそんなもの信じてるのかね？
私はともかくじいさまばあさま方がちょっと。ここ数日やたら外来者多いですし。
安水の連中の事情は知らんよ。私にどうしろと？油まみれになってパンク修理しろと？
いや、そこまでなくても藤吉の長者として困ってるマロードを助けるのにお力添えをいただけないかと。
困った時だけ長者を頼るのではなく、安水流のもてなしでもしたらどうかね。崖から突き落とすんだったか？ん？
Whoa, what the hell?
いや、そんな言っちゃダメですよ。
Jamie's tone was slightly off. I could feel a bit of irritation behind her words.
本当、お恥ずかしい限りなんですが、なんとかしてみるんで、道具だけ貸してもらえませんか？
なんだと？
道具やらキットやら仮に入るだけで、作業は別のところでしますから、もちろんお代は払います。
まあ構わんがね。下手に物を破損させたりしたら弁償してもらうぞ。学生だか知らんがきっちりしてもらう。
Then he pointed me to the garage and walked back to the mansion.
いやー、なんとかならない気がしてきた。チューブがバーストってなんだろう。
春明さんかっこ悪。
バイク乗りならスパナ1本で何でも修理してみせろと？
まあわかりませんけど、なんかそういうメカに強い感じ出したらグッとくる女は多いのでは。
じゃあ野里氏にはグッときたと？
いやー、どうせ知ったかぶりだから。 あの人多分自分じゃ整備もできないよ。筋金入りの裏なり病炭だし。
え、じゃあなぜバイクの整備用品なんて。
野里屋敷は上富士吉にある野里家のもっと大きいお屋敷からいらないものを運んで置いとくような場所らしくてね。56年前に清之助さんが単車買ってもらったけど、ろくに乗りこなせなくてお蔵入りにしたとか聞いたことある。
Damn. That was the countryside for you. Couldn't hide your shame if your life depended on it. Anyway, I now knew the man was the condescending, pretentious type. He still helped me out though, and it was true I didn't know much about the bike repairs, so I couldn't really get mad.
さ、そうと決まれば使えそうなものは全部持ち出してやろうぜ。
さながら山賊のごとく乗った。私邪魔じゃないかな。
いや、適当に話してないと気がめいるんで、相槌打ってくれるだけでも助かる。
The instructions that came with the repair kit told me that my bike's tires were a rather difficult type to repair. Apparently I had to remove the tires, but where did I even start with that? Well, as long as I didn't break it, nothing I could do could be worse than having to call road service down here, so I just tried taking it apart. But as I removed whatever nuts I could find, I made the situation even worse than it was. Yeah, this really wasn't a job for an amateur.
お兄さん大変そうね。ちえみちゃんもよかったら食べてね。
わあ、ありがとうございます。
なんか大事になってんな。機械っつうのはやっぱダメだな。
まあ壊れさえしなきゃ文明の利器は便利だけどね。
日暮れまでに治りそうかい？
厳しいかも。最悪なんとかするから安心して、おばあちゃん。
I really appreciated how she handled the visitors in my stead.
なあ知恵ね、バイクって免許簡単に取れんの？
どうだろう。原付なら簡単よ。私も持ってるし。
中型大型の二輪は結構めんどいよ。普通免許取るのと同じ学科講習もあるし。バイク好きなのかい？
ああ、関係ねえだろ。ちなみにそれいくらすんだよ。
これは新車で80万くらいかな。
たっけはたっけバカ、どうやって貯めんだよ。
まあバイトとか頑張ったから。
そんな新車が事故ってなんて、春脇さん気の毒。
ちえみ先生、さっきから気にはなってたんだけど、差し入れ僕の分は？
先生思わず全部食べちゃった。春脇さん気の毒。
I didn't want sympathy from the one responsible. As I told her off for not leaving me any food, I somehow removed the tires. I can only hope I'd be able to fix this up. I'd had this thing for less than a month, but the trouble it was putting me through made it feel somewhat dear to me. I want to fire it up again and make it go as fast as I could. Suddenly, I heard an engine. It felt like it was mocking me. Hold on, an engine? Here? I stopped working and turned around to see an unfamiliar van drive into the plaza. Bearing the classic-looking piece of junk in Masato's garage, this was the first time I'd seen a car here. As far as I knew, no one living here actually owned a running car, so...
さっき言った記者さんたちだね。
I knew it. Once the van stopped, a lady stepped out of it.
こんにちは。
Oh, she's pretty.
どうも。
今日もご迷惑をおかけします。これまで見ないお方ね。
どうも自己春明です。
そこまで自虐的になんなくても。
Crap, that was no time for an inside joke. I quickly introduced myself properly.
ちょっとその辺で事故りましてね。ここに寄せてもらってます。
なるほど、学生さんね。事故は災難だったわね。ちなみに私はこういうものです。
The woman gave me her business card. Hisako Mamiya, a freelance writer. Her pen name was Kyoko Hosei.
ちなみに読んだことない？宝生9個の記事。
すみません。
だよね。まだまだマイナーだし、そもそも記事載った雑誌、主婦向けとシニア向けだし。
それは難易度高いな。ちなみに何を書いておられるんです？
フードレビュー、変わった食品専門のね。
あれですか？ 世界で一番臭い缶詰とかそういう。
そうそう。まあシュールなんて今さらネタになんないから国内に絞ってマイナーな珍味を探し歩いてるわけ。そんなわけで郷里に変わった料理があるとか情報があったらぜひちょうだい。日本全国どこでも行くから。
ラボの後輩がキャンパス内で取ったキノコで豚汁作ったら集団幻覚が起きまして。
思いつきと毒物は却下ね。
As we chatted, I became curious.
そういえば取材の方はお二人とか。
ええ、もう一人いるわ。ちょっと降りてくるのに時間が。あ、来た来た。
I looked at the van and became completely awestruck. It felt like the van had shed its skin or something. That made no sense, but seriously, how did this fit in there? He was gargantuan. Takumi-san was something, but this man was on the level of a foreign heavyweight wrestler. Though, unlike Takumi-san, this man was primarily fat rather than muscle. As he walked out of the driver's seat, the van shook wildly.
写真家の橋本雄大さんよ。こちらは私よりもっとずっと有名。オールラウンドでご活躍中で、写真はきっと気づかないうちに何枚か目にしてるはずよ。
I didn't know much about photography, but I was definitely convinced. There was a certain kind of authority, or gravity around him. He wasn't saying a word, and I couldn't tell what he was thinking.
どうもはじめまして。久石春明です。
Was he even alive?
どうも。
After a strange pause, he slowly bowed like the moving mountain he was, and greeted me with a voice like a titan. He seemed somewhat difficult to interact with.
今日で最終日でしたっけ？
ええ、オリベさんが秘蔵の獅子慣れを開けてくださるってことなので。
よその人に耐えられるかな。
まあ胃薬も持ってきてるから大丈夫でしょ。
And so, Mamiyashi and Hashimochi walked off to the dining hall. Who would have thought that such a beauty was a delicacy hunter? I had to admit that Gap was kind of charming. As intrigued as I was, I couldn't waste any more time. I had to fix my bike already. Whoa. A lot of things had surprised me here in Yasumizu, but nothing as much as this.
もしもし。
No reaction. At first glance, he looked like a poor man too senile to think and perceive properly.
何かご用ですか？
I made sure to speak as clearly as possible. It didn't look like he understood. I figured it was best just to ignore him and resume the repairs, but... I looked at him again. He was still just standing there like his soul and brain had left his body. A vacant stare, yellowed eyes, half-open mouth covered in saliva. He spoke again.
何が来るんです？
What? His voice was too hoarse to make out.
何ですって？
I placed my hand against my ear. He finally understood what I wanted and prepared to whisper something. I brought my ear closer and...
狼が来るぞ。
The sudden shout caught me completely off guard and made me fall to the ground. He looked down at me, laughing. He clapped and opened his half-toothless mouth in a wide smile.
狼が来るぞ。狼が来るぞ。
He bent his body in a weird way, laughed like he was convulsing, turned around, and just left.
春明さん。遅かったか。
Kaimi had joined the journalists and only just came back.
何が遅かったと？
おじいちゃん、知らない人にはああやっていたずらするんだよ。
え、あれちえみちゃんの？
いやいや、本名は知らないんだ。昔から休みずにいるおじいちゃんだけど、昔からあんな感じ。
ボケてるというか、ちょっとおかしいのか、あの人。
うん、みんな狼じじいって呼んでるけどね。
Named after the boy who cried wolf, I assume? Doesn't work as well, though.
狼ね
As far as I knew, there were no wild wolves in Japan. There used to be, but after the last sighting in either the Meiji or Showa era, they've been considered extinct here. Modern Japan's images of wolves come from Western fairy tales and the like. It wasn't linked to anything in our culture or life. Even The Boy Who Cried Wolf was a Western tale. Did his brand of insanity make him repeat the tale or something? Yeah, a bit weirded out by the circumstances, I went back to repairing my bike. After a bit more time, I somehow took off the rubber from the tires and removed the tubes. Both tires were pierced by some really rusty nails. Fuck, this kind of stuff only happened at the worst of times. Then I applied the patches and filled them with air using a manual pump. I wet the tubes. There were no bubbles, meaning no air was leaving them. Things were looking good. After the high schoolers came back from school and passed by, no one else stopped to talk. Jamie was looking a bit bored now.
なんとかなりそうかも。
え、嘘。あんなにダメっぽかったのに。
悪かったね。まあ、これを組み立て直すって大仕事が残ってるけど。
それが終わったら出発できそう？
そうだね。長居するとまずそうなのはよくわかったし。
そう、よかった。
She didn't seem to care that much. Guess I had no chance with her, huh?
もう何時間も缶を詰めっぱなしでしょ？大丈夫？疲れてない？
昼食休憩の機会が誰かさんに奪われたこともあってね。
代わりにクラッカーをあげたじゃないですか。
Like that was enough to sate a guy in his mid-20s.
まあ、僕は大丈夫。もう一頑張りする。君ももう行っていいよ。大体の人とは顔合わせしたような気がするし。
多分あと2人会ってない人がいるかな。
Really? Well, there was no real need to, right?
もうちょっといるよ。どうせ暇だから帰ってきたわけだし、することもないし。
52人の男友達と遊ぶ選択肢はなかったの？
前言撤回。暇したいから帰ってきたの。街暮らしは面倒も多くて、52人からのメール攻めとかさ。
そっか。
ごめん、52人は嘘。
なんでそんな嘘を？
春明さんに対する牽制？
Why would she pull a tactic like that only to reveal her hand?
ねえ、彼女に振られたって本当？
And now she asked me that.
本当だって。
そっか。
Well, after that relentless assault, it wouldn't be fair unless I played my own card.
なんならこれ乗っていく？
え、これって2人乗りなんだ。
もちろん。一応タンデム用のヘルメットも吊るしてきてるし、まだ乾いてないけど、僕はこのままここを出ていくから、その便でちえみちゃんも外に出るのが都合良ければってことになるけど、ついでにロングツーリングしてみる？時間さえあればどこへだって行くよ。
Flexible, open to fine-tuning, wild and charming. This was a good date invitation if I said so myself.
いいね、素敵。都合問題ないよ。
Oh?
じゃあ荷物まとめてくるね。
Jamie smiled and turned around to head to her place. She then looked back at me and...
急いだ方がいいよ。ちえみさんの気が変わらないうちにね。
はいはい、もちろん。
Well, that made me motivated. This was one tiring trip, but at least I met someone good along the way. I'd just forget everything I didn't want to remember while on the road with her. I could only hope that clever girl and I would eventually grow closer. With that ulterior motive in mind, I resumed rebuilding the bike. After several failed attempts, I was finally making some good progress putting the bike back together. Afternoon had passed and it was almost evening. At the rate I was going, I'd definitely be working while it was dark. Would that even be possible? It might be way past midnight by the time I was done. Jamie might dump me for that. Man, life sure is hard. The plaza I'd worked in was now totally empty. There was no one around me. All I could hear was the wind, the frogs, and the tools in my hand. It was desolate, to say the least. I suddenly felt really weak. It made me keenly aware of being in a place I didn't belong, and that I was preparing to escape. It was an oppressive atmosphere, like the bars of a cage were slowly swinging shut. What's this, Haruki? You think you're going to get attacked or something? I tried to laugh it off, but it didn't work, and I became more conscious of my surroundings. I began to hear things I hadn't noticed before. I heard a voice. Someone was singing. It was an inarticulate little girl's voice. I stopped my work. Before I knew it, I'd put my tools down and gone looking for the source. Was I that starved for human presence? Or did the malaise make me feel like I was in danger? I walked down the hill to where the song came from. Passing the tall grass, I arrived.
信内さんのお守りは
It was a strange sight. The field was covered in tall grass. There were countless rocks peeking out of it. Unlike the boulders all over Yasumizu, these were only up to my waist. They looked like gravestones.
いついつクジラも斜めに走る
The field extended into the dusky western sky before ending at a cliff. This was the lowest spot in Yasumizu, the border to Sadanaga. There was a large pine right at the edge.
嵐を見とけが生えり
The evening sun, the stones, and the pine's shadow gave the field a strange aura. The little girl was running through it. Her steps were awkward. At this moment, this space was alien. I felt like I was looking at a Giorgio de Chirico painting. The place felt like it didn't belong in this world. Suddenly, I came to understand that this place was special. It was a sacred, mystical ground where no outsiders were welcome. The girl fell.
大丈夫？
I run to, with no hesitation, the little girl. Help up, half-crying little girl, muddy clothes, new graze on band-aid covered kneecap. Whoa, this is weird. I guess they left some of the editing notes in here. I console the little girl. Push away, run. Someone. Appears girl. Saw once. Me.
夕霧立てば宴の支度
I'll have to go back to the Switch version to see if that happened there too. I don't really recall that weird editing mistake. Girl, weave incomprehensible phrase. Hid behind little girl. Fear and hostility. Eyes.
逃げて
Girl, hug. Little girl. Warn. Me?
間に合わないでも逃げて
Me, girl, behind. Me, girl, behind. Mist. Mist. Me. Wait, what the fuck is going on here? Why does it look like this? Oh, okay. It really is just... Alright, maybe I just don't recall this happening. Me, girl, behind. Mist. Mist. Me. Turn around. Run. Where? In a daze, I came back to the plaza. Suddenly, Chaimi shook me, bringing me back to my senses.
どこへ行ってたの
ごめん。すぐ作業に戻るから。
何言ってるのもうダメ間に合わない春秋さんも隠れて
I couldn't understand what she was getting at.
何やってんだチーミー、とっとと部屋に戻れ。
でも春秋さんが
ほっとけそんなよそ者。俺はおやっさんと他の連中んち回るから絶対戻れよチーミー。
I couldn't understand. What were these two doing? What scared them so much? It didn't take long for me to find out. I looked down the hill. From Sadanaga, beyond the field I'd just been in, came a rising haze. It was so dense you could easily call it mist. It moved strangely, like a living creature, as it flowed into the plaza.
春秋さんこっち
Chaimi pulled me by the hand.
何がなんだか頭がなんだ頭が重いな。
今は我慢してどこか鍵のかかるところに一人で入るの出ないと死んじゃう
どういうことなの？理由を。
お願い春秋さん今だけは言うことを聞いて
Albeit hesitantly, I did as she said. We ran up the hill and crossed a rice field path until we made it to a simple outhouse.
ここならなんとか
本当何事なんだ？確かにすごい霧だけど、そんな慌てることじゃ。
いい春秋さん詳しく説明してる時間はないだからお願いだから今から言うことを絶対に守って
今から一晩ここに入って鍵をかけて絶対に物音一つ立てないで。
My mind was pretty clear by this point, so much that I began to wonder why it was clouded until now. Because of that, I could easily understand exactly what Jamie just said, despite how weird it was. I could also see she was really desperate. Oh, well, I'm gonna hide in the outhouse.
またとんでもない指示が来たもんだ。
春明さん、
言っとくけど相当な無茶ぶりだからね。ノルマクリアの暁には相当な見返りと説明を要求するから。
いいよ、全部話す。だから今晩を生き延びて。
The words, the teary smile, none of it looked fake.
じゃあね。君も急ぐんでしょ？
それじゃ春明さん、
何？
明日言うから。
Leaving me one hell of a homework assignment, Jamie ran off. The plaza was covered in the mist by now. I could see it rising to take over the fields, too. Anyway, a promise was a promise. 10 minutes later, I began to wonder what I was doing. Was I really supposed to spend the night here? This outhouse wasn't a prefab you'd find in a construction site. It was just a shack built by hand. It merely happened to have a toilet unit installed. It was Japanese style, so I couldn't even sit down. All I could do was stand. Another problem, it was the type of toilet that periodically had to be pumped empty, so the smell was really bad. Sure, there was a cover on the toilet unit, but without any kind of air freshener anywhere, the smell of ammonia could only do so much. The only good thing about being here was that if I had to go to the toilet, well, mission complete, but what of it? Again, was I really supposed to spend the night here? The question quickly made me realize how stupid this was, and I began making assumptions to make this easier for myself. Was I being pranked? Or was everyone here just crazy? Hell, the mist had already filled the surroundings, and there was no way that this shabby outhouse protected me from it. The air here already felt misty and damp. The temperature here was low, so I could still bear it somewhat, but staying here all night would make me all wet. Again, I wasn't safe from the mist here. That considered, I'd probably be better off sleeping in the grass outside than staying here. The reasonable part of my mind urged me to stop playing along with these hicks. However...
今から一晩ここに入って鍵をかけて絶対に物音一つ立てないで。いいよ、全部話す。だから今晩を生き延びて。
My sense of duty made it hard for me to break the promise I'd made to her. Actually, that wasn't quite true. I was more intrigued by the prospect of learning more about this place. Anyway, I took the time to compile what I'd found out today. This was the Yasumizu settlement, a special part of Fujiyoshi. It was situated right next to the Sadanaga Rapids. The people living here were Cheimi Setazawa, Yasunaga Orabe, his family, Kiyori Orabe, and Yoshitsugu Orabe, Chikmochi Kamoshida, Aharu Makishima, her granddad, Kanzo Makishima, Tai Yamawaki, Takumi Muro, Kinosuke Nasato. It seemed like he was from Kamafujiyoshi, the place on the other side of the mountain, but for some reason he lived here now. And finally, the old man who cried wolf. Those were the 11 people I'd met, and Jamie said I had 2 more left. I can only mean that the 2 I'd met by that pine were the ones. A little girl. She was probably the child that strayed into Sadanaga yesterday morning. And then there was the fantastical-looking white-haired woman clad in strange clothing. She was probably the one I'd seen in the morning. The fact I'd seen her twice made it likely that she was indeed real, but with how mysterious this place was, I couldn't rule out the possibility that she was an illusion. According to Jamie, the little girl was being looked after by someone in the village, so I could only assume that the white-haired woman was the one. If I counted the little girl, it would mean that Yasumizu had 13 inhabitants. Then there were the 2 journalists, Hisako Mamiya and Yudai Hashimoto. Add me to that and you had a total of 3 outsiders, but I'd put that aside for now. Anyway, time for an assessment. Yesterday morning, a little girl strayed into Sadanaga. To make it worse, no one, not even herself, knew anything about her. She instantly got branded as an ill omen. The next day, Chaimi, who was in Satanaga for some reason, found me there. They recognized me as a proper lost person, but since I came through Satanaga, I was also branded as an ill omen. From what Kinosuke Masatoshi said, it was safe to assume that it used to be customary to throw people like us into Satanaga. And then there was the mist. The girl said something mysterious. Prepare for the feast when the evening mists arrive. I can only assume it was related to the same superstitions. After all, the mist came from Satanaga itself, and the river seemed to be central to the local customs and ideas. With that in mind, how was it dangerous? What was going to happen now? Yomi Bitu, as in people from Yomi, the ancient Japanese land of the dead? Dead people came back through Satanaga, and they were corrupted? Well, that gave room for some wild ideas. Was there some sort of pathogen in Satanaga that rose up with a mist? Did it turn people into zombies? Was I about to be part of a Japanese Resident Evil? Wait, that was already Japanese. What if you had a 10% chance to be infected by the mist, but a 100% chance to be infected by another person? That explained why everyone had to isolate themselves like this. If I became a zombie, I probably wouldn't have to mind the lock on the door. So basically, by locking myself in here, I was quarantining myself. I had put all that much thought into that, but that seemed like a good story. Or I hadn't put that much thought into that, but that seemed like a good story. Sure, stuff like the boulders and the wolves didn't fit anywhere into my idea, but it was still interesting. Then again, I knew this was Hicksville and all, but would a superstition that science could explain so easily really survive the modern world? It seems so weird.
今から一晩ここに入って鍵をかけて絶対に物音一つ立てないで。
Don't make a sound. To be frank, the reason why I spent so much time on these delusions was because I was scared of things I didn't know or understand. In the past, people used to attribute stuff like natural phenomena and diseases to gods, devils, yokai, and then do nothing but fear them. They were scared of these manifestations of monsters and whatnot, but on the other hand, it was better than not seeing or not knowing what they really were. The fact that you could die to things you couldn't see or understand made life really unreasonable and unfair. That was why it was very logical to give things names and mental images in order to recognize them and memorize them. My fear of things I didn't know was the same, except I wasn't satisfied with just labels and hypotheses. I needed to reach the truth. That aside, what I was feeling right now wasn't fear of the unknown. It was a realistic, practical fear of something that could endanger my life.
今から一晩ここに入って鍵をかけて絶対に物音一つ立てないで。
That meant that outside lurked something dangerous that could hear sounds. Perhaps it was the so-called dead that rose up from the river. Or maybe, assuming I was right with my Satanaga sickness theory, it was people who came out and beat the shit out of all the diseased who didn't follow the rules. The wolf is coming. Maybe the wolf was the title given to the killer? Suddenly I heard a scream in the distance. Let's go out and take a look. I don't have any choice anyway. Wow, that was some timing. Right as I was about to form a new hypothesis, the proof connecting it all suddenly came to me, and it was right outside. It had gotten really dark. There were no lights anywhere. The darkness was fear. Unperceived, unknown, dangerous, scary. Leaving this place was dangerous. Dangerous equals scary, 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 scary. Scary things were scary no matter how much logic you applied. But I couldn't discard my desire to get to know the fear and conquer it. I opened the door and stopped in place. Night wasn't absolute darkness. No matter how dark or cloudy it was, the sky always gave some bit of light to us. However, I came to understand that it could be hard to see even if there was light. Everything I saw was covered in a dense mist. Combined with the pale moonlight, it made the area seem milky. It made it hard to get around. Regardless, I couldn't ignore the scream. There was something beyond this veil. I kept moving forward. Unless my ears were deceiving me, the scream belonged to a woman and had come from the night. I couldn't let myself think that. Or rather, I didn't want to think that. The unknown was scary. Personally, I'd found that principle made my life really easy. I had more than enough fear from those which were directly threatening my life. I really didn't want to have the fear of losing someone as well. Change your line of thought, Haruki. Solving this mystery might save someone. 2 birds with 1 stone. I began walking faster. Another scream. It was close. I realized I had to find a way to protect myself. I was unarmed, so I looked around for anything I could use as a weapon. I felt around to see if there were any branches or anything. Sadly, all I felt was grass. I went deeper and searched the ground itself. Soon I felt something hard. It was a rock. A moment of digging later, I took it in hand. It was a bit smaller than my hand. I almost teared up at how useless it seemed, but it was better than nothing. I looked at the base of my feet and saw the grassy ground. I could easily move forward if I first checked the ground using my feet. And since I might have been close to danger, I had to focus on what was ahead, too. I'd recognize the danger and, if possible, get rid of it. I concentrated entirely on that and stepped forward. I couldn't hear the screams anymore, but I could hear other things. A wet sound, and the sound of something cracking. It filled my mind with countless things I didn't want to imagine. Even so, I kept walking forward, until I saw it. Oh, my hypotheses were nothing but delusions. The truth was totally something you had to see yourself. But why? Why was this so scary in spite of being true? It wasn't supposed to exist. It couldn't exist. After all, it was a wolf with a humanoid body. And there's no such things as werewolves. The next morning, in a paddy field in Fujiyoshi Yasumizu, 3rd block, someone discovered a thoroughly mangled corpse. The clothes nearby led the discoverers to conclude that it was the traveler, Harayoki Fusayashi.
まだ動いてんぞ。
Strangely enough, I could perceive this particular moment.
読み人じゃなきにせえ
And so I
さよなら、春秋さん。
was finished off by the girl.
宴が始まりました。
The last thing I heard
狼をくくる。
was that. Cold open, raging loop. Unveiled rival. First ending. We won't have much more to play, unfortunately. Key 02, Key 2, Werewolf and Resurrection. You can view it in the key list. The route unlocked by this key is represented by the same number on the scenario chart. Bad ending number 2. Let's watch the hint counter. Yes, let's watch the hint counter. Or the corner, sorry.
よ、やっちまったな大将。俺のことはまあ気にすんな。取るに足らねえインターフェース的なキャラクターさ。羊とでも呼べよ。ここは夢と夢の狭間。臭いし春秋とかいう野郎には見えねえから、まあ安心してくつろぎな。つってもあんま長っちりはできねえかな。俺は忙しいんだ。ちゃっちゃと進めんぞ。ヒントコーナーにふさわしく、大将が困らねえようにありがてえ助言をいくつかくれてやるぜ。まず、ゲーム的なあれこれを最初に言っておこう。さっき、やっちまったと言ったが、実は大将が最初にここに来んのは確定事項だ。つうのも、選べる選択肢は一つしかなかったろ。その下はなんか、鍵マークみてえなのが出て、選べなかったはずだ。おっと。だからって、最初の芹沢千恵美とのうすらバカ問答を選び直しても無意味だぜ。どれを選んでも分岐はしねえ。チュートリアルでも一応解説したが、念のため、レイジングループの仕組みをおさらいしとくか。大将がさっき実際に食らった通り、レイジングループでは必ず死ぬ。なぜか。多くの選択肢はロックされていて、それを開くためには対応するキーが必要だからさ。キーはシナリオ中に散らばってる。手に入るときはだいたい命と引き換えさ。だから死は不可避ってわけだ。どうやら夫妻師春秋の野郎は死んでも記憶を次に持ち越せるらしいな。それを再現したシステムってわけだ。つうわけで、羊さんから大将への最初のアドバイスだ。行き詰まったら死んでみろ。数あるバッドエンドの中には、キーが手に入るものも多い。意外な結末からキーが手に入ることもあるだろうさ。 もちろん全部のバッドエンドを見なくても必要なキーを集めて最短クリアすることは可能だ。遊び方は任せるぜ。で、今回のバッドエンド2、題して、ベンジョマンの最後についてだが、回避するにはキー2が必要だ。だが、次はもう問題ねえ。気づいてるか？ここで死んだ時すでに、大将はキー2を入手してる。キー2の内容は、メニューの中にキーってボタンがあるから、そこで見てくれりゃいいんだが、要は、夜出歩いたら死ぬってことを、久石春明は身をもって知ったわけだ。だからこそ、新しい選択が可能になった。この手の一度つまずく系の死亡エンドは、今後も何回かあったら、そこんとこは承知しといてくれな。一方、キーを手に入れるのがずっと先になることもある。キーが手に入るときは赤文字ででっかく表示されるから、今後も要注目だぜ。この後だが、久石春明は振り出しに戻る。つまりゲームの冒頭、バイクで迷ってるシーンだな。最初から読み直してもいいが、今後何十回も死ぬことになるから、その度に読み直してたら大変だ。だから、ある程度状況を把握したら、シナリオチャートを使って、ひょいっとジャンプしちゃってくれ。大将が一度読み切ったシーンなら、いつでもどこでもどこからでもジャンプが可能だ。便利なもんだぜ、こいつはよ。例えば今この瞬間でも、画面に出てるチャートボタンを押し、ノーム、ナイノ、9、悲鳴を追うかに飛んで OK だ。シナリオチャートからのジャンプをガンガン活用するのがレイジングループ攻略のコツかもな。ちなみにここまでで2、ノームは終了。いわば小手調べ、導入が終わったってわけだ。今回解放された選択肢を選べば、いよいよ最初のメインルート、3、読みが始まる。頑張れよ。次にロックされた選択肢が出てきたら、右端の方を見てみな。開くために必要なキーの番号があるはずだ。番号はシナリオチャートにも表示される。どこがロックされてるのか、何番のキーがいるか一目瞭然だ。親切設計だろ？ちなみに、こっそり教えてやるけど、1が手に入るのはすっげー先だ。取りこぼしとかじゃねえから安心して、サクサク次に進んでやってくれ。かー、ずいぶん長くなっちまった。俺は忙しいってのによ。つうわけで、今回はここまで。次も元気に死んでこい。そういう夢だったってわけだ。次はもっとうまくやれ。羊が1匹、羊が2匹。
Okay, so we experienced our first death, and we could go through and like the tutorial saying, kind of reread everything up until that point and maybe make the same choices. But thankfully, this is what's good about Raging Loop, and this is also why I think this is one of the best visual novels out there, because actually very few visual novels with multiple routes actually feature something like this. So we need to go into Dense Mist, and we're going to go to that point. Since we have key number 2 here. We can follow the scream, or we can go to the feast begins. So let's follow the scream. Let's see what happens. Suddenly I heard a scream in the distance. We can go out and take a look, which is what led us to our death, or we can keep still. What was that? It sounded like someone's life was in danger. It meant something dangerous was nearby. Wait, I couldn't be rash. The world didn't have many things that logic couldn't explain, like the existence of murderers. But until I saw the source of the scream myself, it was nothing but a source of fear.
今から一晩ここに入って鍵をかけて絶対に物音一つ立てないで。
I reached to open the door, but something stayed my hand. It was my promise to Chaimi. But that scream just now was very real. It wasn't normal. I had to assume the situation was dangerous, and maybe I could help if I went out. But that meant endangering myself. I was no saint, and I had no plans to rectify that. If there was something that could get me to walk out, it would be curiosity. My curiosity had won over many dangers thus far, but right now it was weaker than my fear and risk of death. Why? Because I already knew. Shit, what the hell were these memories? It wasn't a premonition, a dream, or anything else that vague. My brain recognized it as something I'd experienced. But how? After all, I was still alive, and the time from those memories had yet to come. Was I a precog or something? By God, I swore I'd never experienced anything like this before coming here. And why did the memory come back to me at this particular moment? Regardless, that overwhelming fear, and the pain and death that followed, were exactly what waited for me if I opened the door. I couldn't feel more certain of that. The thoughts rendered me unable to move, immobile. I stood still, completely certain that I'd lost my chance to leave. I wasn't childish enough to sneer at selfish decisions, but this still didn't feel good. Not to mention I was upset at myself for not being able to act like me and just run out simply because I was curious. I didn't even feel saved. Until that moment. Suddenly, the door began to shake. This place had a handle on the outside, and someone was pulling on it hard. There was a lock, sure, but there was only so much it could take before it broke. I prepared to pull on it from the inside, but...
今から一晩ここに入って鍵をかけて絶対に物音一つ立てないで。
Well, what happened if I did? Whatever was outside would instantly know I was here. Even if I protected the door, the thing had lots of other ways of hurting me. But what if it didn't know about me and was just weirded out by this randomly locked toilet? What if I didn't show a hint of fear to what it was doing? Would it just leave? I chose to just wait and see. Once again, someone pulled the door, shaking the structure as a whole. I gulped down a scream and focused on the lock. If it broke, it'd be over for me. Over, as in I'd be dead. That was what that memory told me. I was powerless back then, and even more so now. Assumed I tried to fight back. What would work? I heard that teeth were the hardest part of the human body, so maybe I could bite it? Yeah, I'd tear whatever it was apart with my teeth. I'd bite it to death. I gathered my wits and killing intent. Grinding my teeth, I glared at the door. How long had it been? The sound suddenly stopped. For all I knew, it might have been a ploy to make me drop my guard. I slowly counted to 500. If nothing happened in that time, I assumed it went away. There was no screams or attacks after that, but the sounds around me improved my perception, and I heard strange noises every now and then. Breathing, growling, claws on the ground. Basically, I felt a beastly presence. So that thing actually existed here. Was it what the mist brought here from Sadanaga? The wolf is coming. Did they all know about this? Shit, I couldn't learn anything in a place like this, and not knowing things scared me. Trusting my prescience or deja vu or whatever it was, I chose to just stay quiet and wait. I'd find out everything tomorrow. Okay, I just had to make it through the night and talk to Chaimi. And if it was something I couldn't solve, I'd just run away. Thankfully, my bike repairs were going well, but I'd be leaving even if it didn't work. I'd walk to Kamafujiyoshi if I had to. Unlike Yasumizu, they might have reliable means of transport. For now, I just had to stay awake and make it through the night. 5:15, Tuesday. And why don't we... stop it right there. This is Apostrophe. You've been watching ENG-Raging Loop on the PlayStation 4, but we are running it on the PlayStation 5. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching. I will see you at the next stream.